My name's Anne, and today we'll talk about Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs. This is a fantasy novel, I suppose, although the cover suggests otherwise, and the summary at the back of the book was also misleading. I thought it was going to be a horror story. It is the story of Jacob Portman, who has grown up with incredible stories from his grandfather, Abe Portman. When he was young, he was shown pictures of a boy who could carry heavy rocks despite his slim figure, a boy who had a mouth at the back of his head, a girl who could elevate and fly and whom they had to tie with a rope so she wouldn't get lost in the wind, since she didn't have full control over her powers. They were all sent to this school for special kids, peculiar kids, to be protected from society and the monsters hunting them as well. Jacob used to believe the stories, but as he grew older, he started questioning their legitimacy, whether or not these pictures were photoshopped. Now he's 15 years old and has reached a point where he no longer believes his grandfather's stories and thinks of them only as fairy tales. His father also tells him that Abe's story is somewhat an exaggeration of the truth rather than a complete lie. We find out that Abe Portman lost his family in World War II, and the monsters chasing him were the Nazis, because the special thing about him was being Jewish. The kids in this school were indeed in danger for being who they are, but not in a supernatural, fantastic manner. One fine day, Grandpa Abe is murdered, and Jacob gets to him just right before he dies. He sees a strange and terrifying face watching him from the woods nearby and starts to think he's losing his mind because he thought he saw a creature with tentacles. Abe's last words were, "Find the bird in the loop on the other side of the old man's grave, September 3rd, 1940. Jacob tries to decode this message but fails. He is soon sent to therapy by his parents to help him put what he saw into the past. Jacob, however, convinces his parents to let him travel and explore the place where his grandfather's story originated. But his father insists on accompanying him, so together they travel to an isolated island in Wales in search for the truth behind Abe's stories about Miss Peregrine and her home for peculiar children. Jacob discovers that the house was destroyed early on in World War II by a bomb. He kept going back though in case he finds anything that could help him learn more about his grandfather's life. One day, as he's exploring the ruins, he encounters a girl whom he recognizes from one of the photos from Abe's childhood. He follows her, but she captures him and takes him through a mysterious tunnel into the past. At first, he doesn't know he has time traveled and is confused by how different the island looks all of a sudden, and by the fact, of course, that the house is intact. He soon finds out he's been brought to September 3rd, 1940, and now Abe's last words make sense. Find the bird in the loop on the other side of the old man's grave, September 3rd, 1940. The bird is Miss Peregrine. Surprise, surprise. The loop is a time loop that repeats itself over and over again. September 3rd of 1940 repeats itself every single day, until the moment the bomb hits the home, and then the loop starts over. The loop's entrance is near a place where they had found a corpse of a boy, a 12-year-old boy who is now displayed in a museum and is also known as the oldest person found in the island, and so they called him the old man, even though he's like only 12. So we have a bird in the loop on the other side of the old man's grave on September 3rd, 1940. Everything makes sense. In this time loop, the home is not yet bombed, and Miss Peregrine, who is the headmistress of the home, is a shapeshifter. She is also some kind of time controller, and that's how she created the loop and saved all the children from dying. Jacob finds out that his grandfather chose to leave this place willingly in order to live a normal life. So soon, Jacob returns to the village where he's staying with his dad, and he tells his dad he's found some new friends at the other side of the island, but neglects to tell him who those friends are, of course. Now, Jacob's father always thought that his father, Abe, was cheating on his mother because one time he had found a love letter addressed to him. It turns out that that love letter was from Emma, since Emma and Abe used to be sweethearts. After Abe decided to fight in the war, he sent her a few letters, but then the letters got fewer and fewer until he just stopped responding. His last message was on a picture of a middle-aged Abe holding his daughter in his arms. So Abe was having a normal life, while Emma was left behind living as a teenager forever. A fun fact about this loop is that if you leave it, you soon turn into the person you would be in that year. Let me clarify that. If the loop exists in 1940 and Emma is 16, if she leaves the loop 50 years later, say in 1990, she would turn into a 66-year-old person. And that's exactly how Emma got trapped in the loop forever. That's so sad. Now, Emma has found a new love, Jacob. Over the next few days, Jacob goes back and forth between the past and the present, finding the past more attractive, of course, and it's not because of Emma. As he spends time in the past, there are some terrifying incidents happening in the present. A flock of sheep are found slaughtered, and then a villager is found dead too. When he passes this news on to Miss Peregrine, Jacob is shocked to find out that the killings are probably the results of attacks by some monsters called holocaust. Holocaust are pretty invisible to everyone but a few who can see them. And that's how we find out that Jacob is a peculiar, because he had seen the tentacle monster when Abe died in the beginning of the book. That was the same power as his grandfather's. The rest of the peculiars couldn't see them, which made them extremely dangerous. The holocaust feed on anything, but they prefer eating peculiar children, so they can gain their human appearance once again. You see, these monsters were created by an accident. Some people try to create time loops that not only stop time, but also somehow makes them gain immortality. The experiment went wrong and turned them into these disgusting creatures, and the only way they can take their human form is by eating peculiar kids. The human form is called a white because they still aren't entirely human. They miss pupils. And the only way to recognize a white is by looking at its eyes. Whites are the ones looking for the praise for the holocaust. Jacob then remembers a man he'd seen with no pupils near his grandfather's home the day he was murdered. He had thought the man was blind, but it turns out Jacob's school driver, gardener, and therapist were all the same person, a white, who tracked him down and came to find Miss Peregrine's home. Jacob, Emma, and some of the other students break Miss Peregrine's rule and go to the village to bring the dead villager to life and ask him what really happened. They discover that the killings were in fact the result of a white who in turn attempts to help them killed. But fear not, because they escape. A short time later, we discover that Miss Peregrine has been kidnapped, and Jacob and Emma and some of the other kids go to rescue. The headmistress, however, remains in her bird form, unable to gain her human form. It seems she was injured, And that had some serious consequences on the time loop. Time in the past moves on at its regular pace. The house is finally pumped, and the kids are forced to grow up, actually. Jacob decides to stay in the past to fight the Holocaust and whatever. But before he goes, he decides to talk to his father about it. And that goes very well. He talks to his father for the last time, explaining to him that all of Abe's stories were actually real. Of course, he thinks he's dreaming, so Emma leaves him a small note explaining it was real, along with a picture of herself and Abe, pretty much in love. I don't know what that proves. Before I go on with my opinion on this book, I have to say this first. Growth. Emma was in love with Abe for a very long time, and now she's maybe in love with Jacob, and that's very uncomfortable for me. I don't know, guys, what you think, but I found it very unsettling. The build-up to the story was so beautiful and so smooth, and that was even more disturbing. So I like the way Ransom Riggs presented the whole thing. Like, I like the story build-up, the love story build-up, but I'm not quite fond of the love story itself. And I think that's the only thing I didn't like about this book. I know it's not like the main point of the story, but it's something that bothered me. I like that the story explores the differences between appearance and reality and how Jacob's mind evolved with the years. It's a good depiction of how we believe in fairy tales and Santa, or for me it was Hogwarts. How we believe all those things when we were young, and as we grow older they seem fabrications of the human mind and stretched, far-fetched lies. I think just because of that we were happier when we were kids. Sometimes I wish I could believe in fairy tales again, but I suppose my generation is way past that. This book made me feel young again, and that's something I really appreciated about this book. It's not like you feel 14 every day. 14 is a good age. The narrative and the language were superb, and the pictures, God, the pictures in this book were so on point. They gave me the creeps. I really liked that every time a picture is described in the story, we get to see that picture in the next page or so. Some were so creepy, others were just sad. The saddest part of all, though, was when Jacob left at the end of the book. And it makes me wonder where that leaves his father. Bear with me, guys. Let's talk about that for a minute. Mr. Portman had no relationship whatsoever with Abe. He thought he was cheating on his mother. He's jealous of the special relationship Jacob and Abe had. And we also know that he's a failure of a writer, living off of his wife's money. Afraid that if he fails to make his writing career work, she might leave him. So with all that going on, Jacob abandons him. I felt so sad at this part, and I'm sure Mr. and Mrs. Portman are going to get divorced now, because how is he going to explain his son's disappearance to his wife? I know I wouldn't be able to explain to my spouse how my son went to a different time and age to fight monsters with my grandpa's ex. I know it's not the point of the story, but I can't stop thinking about it. Oh, Kapucina, say hi. Hi. How did the father justify to his wife the disappearance of his son, their son? Do they get divorced? Do they work it through? I don't know. I'll make a review on the next books when I read them, so if you want to know what happens next, make sure to subscribe. And like this video if you like this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Bye-bye.